The fluorescent lights of Pinewood Memorial Hospital cast long shadows across the empty corridor of the maternity ward. Sarah Thompson, Sarah to everyone who knew her, pressed her hands against the small of her back, trying to ease the growing discomfort. Her husband, Jack Miller, paced beside her, his worn sneakers squeaking against the freshly waxed floor. "I'm just going to grab some coffee, honey," Jack said, his voice carrying an unusual edge. "Need anything?" Sarah shook her head, watching as he pulled his phone from his pocket, checking it for the 1,000th time that evening. Something had been off about him lately, subtle changes in his behavior that she couldn't quite pin down. But now wasn't the time to worry about that. Their baby was coming, and that's all that mattered. "Hurry back!" she called after him, managing a smile despite the mounting pressure in her abdomen. "Your daughter might decide to make her grand entrance any minute now." Jack turned back, his dark eyes meeting hers for a brief moment. There was something in that look, something that would haunt Sarah for months to come. Without another word, he disappeared around the corner. Hours passed. The coffee machine was just down the hall, barely a 2-minute walk. Yet Jack didn't return. Sarah's contractions intensified, each wave of pain accompanied by growing anxiety. She called his cell phone repeatedly, each call going straight to voicemail. "Mrs. Miller?" A nurse appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. "We need to prep you for delivery now. Where's your husband?" Sarah's voice trembled as she replied, "I don't know. He went for coffee and he just vanished." The nurse's expression shifted from professional concern to personal worry. "I'll alert security," she said, reaching for the room's phone. As the hospital staff mobilized to search for Jack, Sarah lay in her hospital bed, one hand resting on her swollen belly, the other clutching her phone. Outside her window, the Michigan night stretched vast and dark, hiding whatever secrets had pulled her husband away on what should have been the most important night of their lives. The monitor beside her bed beeped steadily, marking time in an endless rhythm, while somewhere in Pinewood, Jack Miller had become a ghost, leaving behind only questions and the weight of betrayal on what should have been a night of joy. Another contraction gripped Sarah, and memories flooded her mind like a tide she couldn't control. 6 months ago, they'd been sitting on their front porch, Jack's hand resting protectively over her growing belly as the sunset painted Pinewood in shades of gold. "I never thought I could be this happy," he'd said then, his voice thick with emotion. But now, as Sarah gripped the hospital bed rails, those words felt hollow. "Try to breathe through it, Mrs. Miller," the nurse encouraged, adjusting the fetal monitor. "Your blood pressure is a bit high." Sarah closed her eyes, trying to focus, but her mind kept drifting to the subtle changes she'd noticed in Jack over the past few weeks, the hushed phone calls that ended abruptly when she entered the room, the mysterious meetings that kept him working late, the way he'd started checking over his shoulder when they went into town. "Something's wrong," she'd confronted him just 3 days ago in their kitchen. "You can tell me anything, you know that." Jack had pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Just work stress." But it wasn't fine. The growing distance between them had been palpable, like a shadow creeping across their marriage. Now, as another contraction peaked, Sarah remembered the strange man she'd seen watching their house last week, tall, well-dressed, definitely not from Pinewood. "Mrs. Miller?" Detective Lisa Carter's voice pulled her back to the present. She stood in the doorway, her notebook open. "We've reviewed the security footage. Your husband left the hospital at 11:42 p.m. He got into his truck and drove off." "That doesn't make any sense," Sarah gasped between contractions. "All our bags are here, our car seats, everything we need for the baby." The detective's expression softened. "We've put out an alert. Does your husband have any family in the area? Anyone he might have gone to?" Sarah shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "His parents are in Florida. We only have each other here." Another contraction hit, stronger this time. The nurse checked the monitors, her forehead creasing with concern. "Detective, we need to focus on the delivery now. Mrs. Miller needs to stay calm." As the medical team prepared for delivery, Sarah's mind drifted to the small box she'd found in Jack's work drawer last week. Inside had been a new passport, not in his name, and a stack of cash. She'd convinced herself it was nothing, just her pregnancy hormones making her paranoid. Now that box seemed like a neon sign she'd chosen to ignore. "Jack," she whispered into the sterile hospital air. "What have you done?" "One more push, Mrs. Miller." The delivery room buzzed with focused energy as Sarah gathered her remaining strength. Outside, Pinewood was waking up to another quiet morning, unaware of the drama unfolding within the hospital walls. With a final determined effort, Sarah brought her daughter into the world. The baby's first cry pierced the air, strong, defiant, alive. "She's beautiful," the nurse said, placing the squirming bundle on Sarah's chest. "A perfect little girl." Through tears of joy and exhaustion, Sarah looked down at her daughter's face. She had Jack's nose and chin, but her eyes, when they finally fluttered open, were all Sarah's. "Lily," she whispered, the name they'd chosen together now feeling like both a blessing and a burden. Lily Miller. A soft knock at the door drew her attention. Tom and Karen Wilson, their neighbors from across the street, stood there holding a small teddy bear. Tom's face was etched with concern. "We came as soon as we heard," Tom said, stepping into the room. "The whole town's talking about Jack's disappearance." Karen rushed to Sarah's side, taking her free hand. "Whatever you need, honey. We're here." Sarah managed a grateful smile, but her eyes drifted to the window. Pinewood spread out below, its familiar streets now holding unfamiliar secrets. Somewhere in that landscape of small-town Michigan life, the answers to Jack's disappearance were hidden. "Has anyone heard anything?" she asked, her voice hoarse from the delivery. Tom shifted uncomfortably. "Nothing concrete, but there are rumors. People saying they saw Jack talking to strangers at the diner last week. Men in suits, not our usual crowd." Lily stirred against Sarah's chest, and for a moment, the weight of everything felt overwhelming. But as she looked down at her daughter's peaceful face, something hardened inside her. This wasn't just about her anymore. This tiny person deserved answers, deserved to know why her father chose to leave on the night she entered the world. "We'll help you figure this out," Tom promised, his voice carrying the weight of years of friendship. "Pinewood takes care of its own." As the morning light filled the room, Sarah held her daughter close, knowing that while one chapter of her life had ended in betrayal, another was just beginning. And this time, she would be the one writing the story. 2 weeks after Lily's birth, Sarah sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by papers and unopened bills. The morning light filtered through the curtains Jack had hung just months ago, casting patterns on the stack of missing person flyers bearing his face. Her fingers traced the edge of a photograph, their last Christmas together, both smiling, unaware of what lay ahead. The sound of Lily's soft breathing through the baby monitor provided a gentle backdrop to her investigation. "There has to be something I'm missing," she muttered, scanning bank statements for the 1,000th time. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. Diane Rogers, the owner of the local diner, stood on her porch with a covered dish. Her usually cheerful face was drawn with concern. "Brought you some chicken pot pie," Diane said, stepping inside. She hesitated before adding, "There's something you should know, Sarah. The day before everything happened, Jack came to the diner. He wasn't alone." Sarah's heart quickened. "The men in suits Tom mentioned?" Diane nodded, lowering her voice despite them being alone. "One of them called him Miller Hawkins, not just Miller. When I asked Jack about it later, he got real nervous, said it was a mistake." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. In their 5 years of marriage, Jack had never mentioned the name Hawkins. She thought she knew everything about him, but now... "There's more," Diane continued, glancing nervously at the windows. "They were speaking about New York, something about finishing what was started." Lily's cry from the nursery interrupted them. When Sarah returned with the baby, Diane was gone, but she'd left a note under the dish. "Be careful who you trust." That afternoon, Sarah drove to the Pinewood police station, Lily secured in her car seat. Detective Carter was waiting, her desk cluttered with files. "Mrs. Miller," she began, then corrected herself. "Sarah, we found something unusual in Jack's background check. His social security number. It was only issued 7 years ago." "That's impossible," Sarah protested. "He grew up in Ohio. He showed me his birth certificate when we got married." The detective's expression remained neutral. "Those documents might not be what they seem. We're dealing with something bigger than a missing persons case." As if on cue, Lily began to fuss. Sarah lifted her daughter, breathing in her sweet baby scent, trying to center herself. On the detective's desk, she spotted a familiar symbol on one of the files, the same one she'd seen on a business card in Jack's wallet months ago. "What's that?" she asked, nodding toward the file. Detective Carter quickly covered it. "Nothing relevant to your case." But Sarah had seen enough. The symbol, a stylized compass rose, was now burned into her memory. Another piece of the puzzle, another seed of doubt planted in the garden of her marriage. Driving home through Pinewood's quiet streets, Sarah's mind raced. The town she'd known all her life suddenly felt different. Every friendly face potentially hiding secrets, every corner possibly concealing answers about Jack's true identity. At a red light, she glanced in her rearview mirror. A black SUV with tinted windows had been following her for the last 10 minutes. As the light turned green, Sarah made a split-second decision. Instead of turning toward home, she headed for the highway. "Hold on, sweetie," she whispered to Lily. "Mommy needs to know if we're really being followed." The SUV maintained its distance, confirming her suspicions. Whoever was watching her knew exactly what they were doing. The question was, were they looking for Jack, or were they watching her? Sarah's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles turning white. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, the adrenaline coursing through her veins. This wasn't the life she had signed up for when she married Jack Miller, or whoever he really was. She took a series of random turns, winding through unfamiliar neighborhoods, always keeping an eye on the rearview mirror. The black SUV remained a constant presence, never getting too close, but never falling too far behind. Finally, Sarah spotted Tom's auto shop up ahead. She pulled into the parking lot, tires screeching. Tom emerged from the garage, wiping his hands on a rag, his expression changing from confusion to concern as he saw the panic on Sarah's face. "Sarah, what's wrong?" he asked, approaching the car. "I'm being followed," she said, her voice shaking. "Black SUV. They've been on my tail for miles." Tom's eyes narrowed as he scanned the street. The SUV cruised past slowly, not stopping. "Get inside now," he said, ushering Sarah and Lily into the shop. Once inside, Tom locked the doors and drew the blinds. "Tell me everything," he said, his voice low and serious. As Sarah recounted the events of the past few weeks, the mysterious men at the diner, Jack's fake documents, the symbol on the detective's desk, she could see the gravity of the situation settling on Tom's features. "This is bigger than Pinewood," he said finally. "You need help, Sarah. Real help." He pulled out his phone, hesitating for a moment before dialing. "I know someone," he explained. "From my time in the Marines. She might be able to help us make sense of all this." As Tom spoke in hushed tones on the phone, Sarah held Lily close, the reality of their situation sinking in. The quiet life she'd known in Pinewood was slipping away, replaced by a world of shadows and secrets she didn't understand. But as she looked down at her daughter's innocent face, Sarah felt a resolve growing within her. Whatever was going on, whatever Jack had gotten himself into, she would find the truth, not just for herself, but for Lily. The safe house turned out to be a modest cabin on the outskirts of town, owned by Tom's Marine friend, Rachel Evans. As Sarah stepped inside, clutching Lily to her chest, she was struck by the contrast between the cozy interior and the high-tech security system blinking silently in the corner. Rachel, a tall woman with short-cropped hair and sharp eyes, wasted no time with pleasantries. "Tell me everything," she said, gesturing for Sarah to sit at the kitchen table. "And I mean everything, even the details you think aren't important." For the next hour, Sarah poured out the whole story, from Jack's disappearance to the mysterious men at the diner, the fake documents, and the symbol she'd seen on Detective Carter's desk. Rachel listened intently, occasionally jotting notes on a small pad. "The compass rose," Rachel mused, sketching the symbol. "It's associated with an organization called the Meridian Foundation. They're officially a global humanitarian group, but there have been whispers, rumors of something darker behind the philanthropy." Sarah's mind reeled. "But what does any of this have to do with Jack? With us?" Rachel's expression softened slightly. "I don't know yet, but if the Meridian Foundation is involved, this goes way beyond a simple missing persons case. We need to tread carefully." As if on cue, Lily began to fuss. Sarah rocked her gently, the simple act of comforting her daughter providing a moment of normalcy in the midst of the chaos. What do we do now? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Rachel stood, moving to the window to peer out at the darkening sky. We gather information, carefully. I have contacts who might be able to shed some light on Jack's connection to Meridian. But Sarah, she turned, her gaze intense. You need to be prepared. The man you married, he might not be who you thought he was. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She'd been clinging to the hope that there was a reasonable explanation for everything, that Jack was somehow still the man she'd fallen in love with. But now, faced with the reality of the situation, she felt that hope slipping away. I need to know the truth, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. Whatever it is, I owe it to Lily. Rachel nodded approvingly. That's the spirit. We'll start digging tomorrow. For now, get some rest. You're safe here. As Sarah settled into the small guest room, Lily sleeping peacefully in a makeshift crib, she allowed herself a moment to process everything. The life she'd known had been turned upside down, but she wasn't alone. She had allies now. Tom, Rachel, and the strength she was discovering within herself. Whatever secrets Jack had been keeping, whatever dangers lay ahead, Sarah was determined to face them head-on. For Lily's sake, and for her own, she would uncover the truth, no matter where it led. The next morning, Sarah awoke to the smell of coffee and the soft murmur of voices. She found Rachel and Tom huddled over laptops at the kitchen table, empty mugs scattered around them. Morning, Rachel said, not looking up from her screen. We've been doing some digging. You might want to sit down for this. Sarah settled into a chair, cradling a freshly awakened Lily. What did you find? Tom slid a folder across the table. Jack Miller isn't his real name. According to our sources, he was born Eric Hawkins. He worked for a private security firm with ties to the Meridian Foundation. Sarah's world tilted. She opened the folder with trembling hands, staring at a photo of a younger Jack or Eric in a crisp suit, shaking hands with a distinguished-looking man outside a sleek office building. Who's that? She asked, pointing to the other man. Viktor Kovalev, Rachel replied. Russian businessman, suspected of having ties to organized crime. He's on the board of the Meridian Foundation. Sarah's mind raced, trying to reconcile the man she'd married with this new information. But why? Why would he leave all that to come to Pinewood? Rachel and Tom exchanged glances. We're not sure, Tom said gently. But about 3 years ago, Eric Hawkins supposedly died in a car accident in New York. A few months later, Jack Miller appeared in Pinewood. The implications were staggering. Sarah looked down at Lily, peacefully oblivious to the upheaval around her. So everything was a lie? Our whole life together? Not necessarily, Rachel interjected. People go into deep cover for various reasons. Sometimes they're running from something. Sometimes they're protecting something, or someone. A sharp knock at the door cut through the tension. Rachel moved swiftly, gun drawn, to check the peephole. Her posture relaxed slightly as she opened the door. Detective Carter, she said, a hint of surprise in her voice. What brings you here? The detective stepped inside, her eyes immediately locking onto Sarah. Mrs. Miller, I owe you an apology and an explanation. Detective Lisa Carter's presence in the safe house added another layer of complexity to the already tangled web of secrets surrounding Jack's disappearance. She sat at the kitchen table, her badge and gun placed deliberately in front of her as a sign of trust. I haven't been entirely honest with you, Sarah, Lisa began, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. I'm not just a local detective. I'm part of a task force investigating the Meridian Foundation. Sarah's grip on Lily tightened instinctively. You knew about Jack, about Eric this whole time. Lisa nodded, her expression pained. We've been tracking his movements since he resurfaced in Pinewood. We believed he had crucial information about Meridian's illegal activities, but we couldn't risk approaching him directly. So you just watched? Sarah's voice rose, anger and disbelief coloring her words. You let me believe I was living a normal life while my husband was… What? A spy? A criminal? It's complicated, Lisa said, holding up a placating hand. Eric Hawkins was deep undercover in Meridian for years. He uncovered evidence of a massive conspiracy, money laundering, political manipulation, even the development of biological weapons. But something went wrong. He had to run. Rachel leaned forward, her interest piqued. The car accident in New York? Lisa nodded. Staged. We helped him disappear, gave him a new identity. He was supposed to lie low until we could build our case against Meridian. But then, he met me," Sarah finished, the realization dawning. "He fell in love and decided to stay." "Yes," Lisa confirmed. "It compromised the operation, but we couldn't force him to leave. We thought maybe, just maybe, he could have a normal life." Tom, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. "But Meridian found him, didn't they? That's why he ran on the night Lily was born." Lisa's expression turned grim. "We think so. We intercepted chatter suggesting they had discovered his true identity. He likely ran to draw them away from you and the baby, Sarah." The room fell silent as the weight of this revelation settled over them. Sarah's mind whirled with conflicting emotions, anger at the deception, fear for Jack's safety, and a glimmer of hope that perhaps their love hadn't been a complete lie. "So what now?" Sarah asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "How do we find him?" Lisa, Rachel, and Tom exchanged looks. It was Rachel who finally spoke. "We have a lead. A possible Meridian operations site not far from here. If Jack's trying to gather evidence against them, that's where he might go." "It's dangerous," Lisa warned. "We're talking about a powerful, ruthless organization." Sarah looked down at Lily, then back at the group around her. Her decision was already made. "I don't care how dangerous it is. That's my husband out there, the father of my child. I'm not sitting on the sidelines anymore." A slow smile spread across Rachel's face. "That's what I was hoping you'd say. Let's make a plan." The Meridian Foundation's supposed humanitarian outpost looked innocuous enough, a nondescript office building on the outskirts of a nearby city. But as Sarah sat in the passenger seat of Rachel's SUV, watching the facility through binoculars, she could feel the menace emanating from the place. "All right," Rachel said, adjusting her earpiece. "Tom and Lisa are in position. Remember the plan. We're just here for recon. No heroics." Sarah nodded, her heart pounding. Lily was safe with Karen Wilson back in Pinewood, allowing Sarah to focus entirely on the mission at hand. She still felt out of her depth, but the crash course in covert ops that Rachel had given her over the past 2 days had helped. As darkness fell, they made their move. Using the access codes Lisa had provided, they slipped into the building through a side entrance. The sterile corridors belied the sinister nature of what was potentially being created within these walls. They reached the main security office without incident. Rachel made quick work of the lock while Sarah kept watch. Inside, they found a bank of monitors showing various parts of the facility. "There," Sarah whispered, pointing to one of the screens. A figure in a lab coat was hunched over a computer terminal, his face hidden from the camera. But Sarah would recognize that posture anywhere. "It's Jack." Rachel quickly downloaded the security footage onto a flash drive. "We need to move. In and out, remember?" But Sarah was already moving towards the door. She couldn't have come this far just to leave Jack behind. Rachel cursed under her breath but followed, her gun at the ready. They navigated the maze-like hallways, the layout memorized from the blueprints Lisa had provided. As they approached the lab where they had seen Jack, alarms suddenly blared to life. "We've been made!" Rachel's voice crackled through the comms. "Abort mission! Get to the extraction point now!" But Sarah pushed forward, her heart racing. She burst through the lab doors, Rachel close behind. The room was empty, signs of a hasty departure evident in the still humming computers and scattered papers. "He was here," Sarah said, frustration and desperation coloring her voice. "We just missed him." Rachel was already at one of the computers, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "He left something," she said, holding up a flash drive. "Let's go!" They raced through the corridors, the sound of boots echoing behind them. Just as they reached the exit, a shot rang out. Rachel stumbled, clutching her arm. "Go!" she gasped, pushing Sarah toward the door. But Sarah stood her ground, supporting Rachel's weight as they pushed through the exit together. Outside, Tom's car screeched to a halt in front of them. They dove in as more shots peppered the air around them. As Tom sped away from the facility, Sarah's mind reeled. They had confirmation that Jack was alive, and whatever was on that flash drive might hold the key to unraveling the whole mystery. But they had also exposed themselves, escalating the danger to everyone involved. Sarah looked at Rachel, who was applying pressure to her wounded arm, then at Tom's grim expression in the rearview mirror. She realized that this was just the beginning. The real battle, for the truth, for justice, and for her family, was only just starting. The safe house was a flurry of activity. Rachel, her arm bandaged, hunched over a laptop with Tom, decrypting the files from the flash drive. Detective Carter paced the room, coordinating with her task force. Sarah sat on the couch, her mind reeling from the night's events. "We've got something," Rachel announced, her voice tense. "It's worse than we thought." The group gathered around the laptop. On the screen, a series of documents detailed a chilling plan codenamed Nightshade. The Meridian Foundation wasn't just involved in financial crimes, they were developing a bioweapon. "They're planning to release it in major cities," Tom explained, his face pale. "Create a global panic, then swoop in with a miracle cure. It would give them unprecedented power and influence." Sarah's heart raced. "And Jack? Where does he fit into all this?" Rachel scrolled through more files. It looks like he was originally part of the security team for Nightshade, but when he discovered the true nature of the project, he tried to stop it. "That's why he ran," Lisa added. "He's been gathering evidence, trying to find a way to expose them without putting you and Lily in danger." A video file caught Sarah's eye. With trembling hands, she clicked play. Jack's face filled the screen, looking haggard but determined. "Sarah, if you're seeing this, it means I haven't made it back to you. I'm so sorry for all the lies, for putting you and Lily in danger. Everything I've done has been to protect you both. The truth is in these files. Don't trust anyone at Meridian. I love you. I hope someday you can forgive me." Tears streamed down Sarah's face as the video ended. The man she'd fallen in love with was still there, buried beneath layers of deception and danger. "We need to get this information to the authorities," Lisa said, already reaching for her phone. "No," Sarah interjected, surprising herself with her firmness. "Meridian has infiltrated who knows how many agencies. We can't risk this falling into the wrong hands." Rachel nodded approvingly. "She's right. We need to go public. Blow this wide open where they can't cover it up. But first," Tom added, "we need to find Jack. He's still out there, and he's our best chance of making sense of all this." As the group began to formulate a plan, Sarah felt a strange calm settle over her. The truth was finally coming to light, and with it, a chance to reclaim her life and protect her family. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of activity. Sarah found herself at the center of a covert operation, using skills she never knew she possessed. With Rachel's guidance, she helped decrypt more files, piecing together the extent of Meridian's network. Tom's military contacts provided support, setting up secure communications and transportation. Detective Carter worked tirelessly, quietly assembling a team of trusted law enforcement officials who could be counted on when the time came to move against Meridian. As for Jack, they had managed to establish a tenuous line of communication through a series of dead drops and encrypted messages. He was alive, constantly on the move, but getting closer. The plan was risky. Jack would turn himself into the authorities, but only after they had released enough information to the press to ensure Meridian couldn't sweep it under the rug. Sarah would be the one to make the information public, telling their story to a journalist friend of Rachel's who had a reputation for breaking high-profile scandals. On the appointed day, Sarah found herself sitting in a busy cafe, her heart pounding as she waited for the journalist. She clutched a folder containing printouts of the most damning evidence, a flash drive with the full data securely hidden in her shoe. "Mrs. Miller?" A woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor approached the table. "I'm Alexis Ward. Let's talk." For the next hour, Sarah poured out the whole story, the lies, the conspiracy, the danger that threatened not just her family but potentially millions of lives. Alexis listened intently, her expression growing grimmer with each revelation. "This is unprecedented," Alexis said finally. "You understand that by going public with this, your life will never be the same." Sarah nodded, thinking of Lily, of Jack, of the future they deserved. Some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. As Alexis left with the evidence, promising to break the story within hours, Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Whatever happened next, the truth would be out there. She was so lost in thought that she almost missed the man who slid into the seat across from her. Her heart stopped as she looked up into Jack's familiar eyes. "Sarah," he breathed, reaching for her hand. "I'm so sorry, for everything." Before she could respond, the cafe's TV flashed with breaking news. Alexis Ward's face filled the screen, the headline below reading, Global conspiracy uncovered, Meridian Foundation exposed. As patrons gathered around the TV, murmuring in shock, Sarah and Jack slipped out of the cafe. It was time to face the music and to start rebuilding their life together. 1 year later. The small house on the outskirts of Seattle buzzed with activity. Sarah, her hair now cut short in a practical bob, juggled a squirming Lily on her hip while directing movers with her free hand. "The boxes for the study go upstairs," she called out, before turning to the kitchen. "Jack, can you handle the groceries? I need to get Lily down for her nap." Jack emerged from the kitchen looking relaxed in jeans and a t-shirt, a far cry from the suit-wearing operative he'd once been. "On it, honey," he said, dropping a kiss on Sarah's cheek as he passed. The past year had been a whirlwind. The exposure of the Meridian Foundation had sent shockwaves through governments and corporations worldwide. Jack had turned himself in, providing testimony that helped bring down key players in the conspiracy. In exchange for his cooperation, he'd been granted immunity. Sarah had found herself thrust into the spotlight, hailed as a whistleblower and hero. She'd used the platform to advocate for greater transparency in global organizations and stricter oversight of private security firms. Now, with the dust finally settling, they were starting over. New names, new city, new jobs. Sarah as a consultant for an ethics and technology firm, Jack retraining as a software engineer. It wasn't the life they had planned in Pinewood, but it was theirs, built on a foundation of hard-won truth and trust. As Sarah laid Lily down in her crib, she heard a knock at the front door. Jack's voice drifted up the stairs, greeting their visitors, Tom and Rachel, who had become like family through the ordeal, and Detective Carter, now a close friend. Sarah joined them in the living room, accepting a glass of champagne from Tom. "To new beginnings," he toasted, raising his glass. "And to the truth," Sarah added, meeting Jack's eyes across the room. He smiled, the love and gratitude clear in his expression. As the conversation flowed around her, Sarah looked out the window at the unfamiliar Seattle skyline. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it felt full of promise. They had weathered the storm together, emerging stronger, wiser, and more committed than ever to living a life of purpose and honesty. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Sarah knew they would face them as a family, bound not by secrets, but by love, trust, and the unshakable truth they had fought so hard to uncover. What did you think of Sarah's story? Please leave a comment with your opinion. 2 buttons will appear next to it, one to subscribe if you haven't already, and another to watch other exciting stories. Make your choice. Thanks for watching this far. See you soon.